They say some prisons are built with walls and iron bars. Hers was built with silence. Every morning, she woke to the same sound, the clink of an empty bottle rolling across the floor, the groan of a man who had forgotten what love even meant, and the heavy weight of her own heart. The world outside was alive, buzzing with cars, voices, and light. But inside her apartment, time stood still. It was a place where laughter had long since died, and only complaints, orders, and anger remained. Her husband had once been charming. At least, that's what she told herself when she needed to remember why she ever said yes to him. But over the years, charm turned into bitterness, and love turned into control. He didn't strike her often anymore. He didn't need to. His words cut sharper than any slap, slicing into her until she no longer reacted. She had learned the art of stillness. No tears, no protests, no hope. That evening, she sat quietly by the window, watching the faint glow of the city lights outside. She thought of the woman she used to be, bright, full of dreams, craving life. Where had that girl gone? Somewhere between his yelling, his cold stares, and the suffocating loneliness, she had disappeared. The sound of keys jingling snapped her back to reality. The front door opened, and he entered. He didn't look at her. He didn't ask how her day was. He tossed his jacket aside and barked his first order. Beer. Now. She obeyed, her hands trembling only slightly as she opened the fridge. He grabbed the bottle without a word of thanks and sat down, flipping through channels on the TV. For him, she wasn't a wife. She was a servant, a shadow, a nameless figure who existed only to meet his needs. But deep inside, a quiet ache gnawed at her. She wanted something more. Just one moment, 1 second, of being seen, of being wanted, even if it came at a cost. That night, after he stormed out to meet his friends, she decided to step out for a short walk. The apartment walls pressed in too tightly, and she needed air. She pressed the elevator button and waited. When the doors opened, she stepped inside, her thoughts heavy. Just as the doors were about to close, a hand slipped through the gap. A man stepped in, tall, confident, with eyes that seemed to notice her in a way no one had in years. It was her neighbor. She had seen him before, but never like this, never so close, never so aware of the way his presence filled the small space. The elevator hummed softly as it began to move. For a moment, silence stretched between them, thick with an energy she couldn't explain. Then, with a sudden jolt, the elevator stopped. The lights flickered once, then died. She gasped, gripping the railing. Her heart pounded. Trapped. The man's voice broke the silence, low and calm. Looks like it's just the two of us now. In that instant, her world, the prison she thought she could endure forever, began to crack. She didn't know whether to feel fear or relief. All she knew was that something had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. The elevator was a coffin of steel and silence. The dim emergency light painted the small space in pale yellow, flickering just enough to remind her she was trapped. She pressed the buttons nervously, but nothing responded. Her chest tightened. He didn't panic. Instead, he leaned casually against the wall, watching her with an intensity that made her shift uncomfortably. His lips curved into the faintest smile, like a man who had been waiting for this very moment. "You're trembling," he said quietly. "Are you afraid of me?" She wanted to answer quickly, to say yes or no or anything that might dismiss the strange tension, but the words caught in her throat. Her husband had never asked her questions like that. He had never noticed her trembling, her fear, her existence beyond what she could do for him. And now, here was this man, her neighbor, standing inches away, his gaze fixed on her as though she were the most fascinating thing in the world. "I'm just nervous," she muttered finally. He stepped closer, not too close, but enough that she felt the heat radiating from his body. "You shouldn't be," he whispered. "Not with me." Her pulse quickened. She didn't understand why she wasn't screaming, why she wasn't demanding space. Instead, she felt the dangerous pull of curiosity, the ache of being noticed, of being wanted. The minutes stretched on. Then, with a sudden jerk, the elevator moved again, rising higher and higher. But instead of stopping at her floor, it continued until it reached the very top of the building. The door slid open, revealing the rooftop access. She froze. This isn't my floor." "I know," he replied simply. His voice was steady, unshaken, like everything was unfolding exactly as he intended. "Come with me." Her instinct screamed to run, to go back, to escape this strange and unsettling invitation. But his eyes held hers, unwavering. Against her better judgment, she followed. The rooftop stretched wide beneath the starlit sky. She expected emptiness, but what she found stole her breath. A table stood in the center, draped in white linen, candles flickering against the breeze, and 2 glasses of champagne glistening in the moonlight. The city lights glittered below them like 1,000 stars scattered at their feet. She turned to him, stunned. Why did you bring me here?" His gaze softened. "Because I've seen you. The way you move through the world as if you're invisible. The way you hide your sadness behind silence. You deserve more than the life you've been given. Tonight, I wanted to remind you what it feels like to be alive." Her throat tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not in years, maybe not ever. The kindness in his words tangled with something darker in his eyes. Possession, desire, hunger. It was both terrifying and intoxicating. He poured the champagne, handing her a glass. She hesitated but took it, her fingers brushing his. Sparks raced up her arm at the contact, leaving her unsettled. "Why me?" she asked quietly, almost pleading. He leaned closer, his voice low and certain. "Because you're not like the others. You burn, even when you try to hide it. I can see it in your eyes, the longing, the ache. You crave escape as much as I crave you." Her chest rose and fell, each breath heavier than the last. She should have walked away. She should have turned and run back to the life she knew, even if it was misery. But instead, she stood frozen under the stars, caught between fear and the unfamiliar thrill of being wanted. For years, her husband had told her she was nothing. Yet here was someone who looked at her like she was everything. She lifted the glass to her lips. The champagne was sharp, sweet, dangerous. As the bubbles slid down her throat, she wondered if she was swallowing freedom or poison. The night stretched on, the candles flickering, the city watching silently below. She didn't yet know that this dinner, this moment of temptation, would change her forever. The rooftop air was cool, but her skin burned as if every nerve had come alive. She hadn't felt like this in years, alive, seen, wanted. And yet, the very thought terrified her. He leaned across the table, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're different," he whispered. "You think I don't notice? You move through life like a ghost, but I see you. I see the fire you've been forced to bury." Her hands trembled around the glass. She wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong. But deep inside, a part of her longed to believe every word. For so long, she had been invisible. Now, under the stars, she felt exposed, and strangely beautiful in that exposure. He reached across the table, brushing his fingers against hers. The touch was deliberate, confident. "I can give you more than a life of silence and bruises. Stay with me tonight. Forget the world that chains you." Her heart raced. The words wrapped around her like velvet and steel at the same time. They promised freedom, but also carried the weight of danger. She thought of her husband, the yelling, the emptiness, the loneliness that had turned her into stone. Then she thought of this man, her neighbor, whose gaze ignited something inside her she thought had died. A voice inside her screamed, "Don't do this. Don't step closer." But her body leaned toward him anyway, drawn as though he were gravity itself. He stood, circling the table until he was beside her. His presence was overwhelming, his shadow swallowing hers. He extended a hand. For a long moment, she stared at it, trembling, fighting against herself. And then she placed her hand in his. The rooftop blurred around her. The city lights, the candles, the cold breeze, all of it faded as he pulled her into his arms. His lips brushed her forehead first, gentle, testing, then lower, trailing fire across skin that had known only harshness and neglect. She felt herself melting, losing the last fragments of resistance. "Am I doing something wrong?" he murmured against her ear, sensing her hesitation. She shook her head, though fear still lingered in her chest. "No, it's just, I don't know if I can go back after this." His grip tightened around her waist, pulling her closer. "Then don't go back. Stay in this moment. Stay with me." The world spun. She wasn't used to this, to being wanted so fiercely, so recklessly. For years, she had been made to believe she was worthless. Now, she was being worshipped like a treasure. It was intoxicating, addictive, and terrifying all at once. They moved together like two people chasing something forbidden, something they both knew couldn't last. Each kiss, each touch, each whisper under the stars drew her further into the storm. She knew she was stepping into fire, but the flames felt better than the numbness she had lived in for so long. And yet, beneath the passion, her heart carried a question that wouldn't leave her. Was this love or another form of captivity? She looked into his eyes, searching for an answer. For a moment, she thought she saw it, a flicker of tenderness, of something real. But just as quickly, it was replaced by a glint of hunger, of possession. No one had ever abandoned him, he told her. He was not used to being denied. She realized then that she wasn't falling into love. She was falling into an obsession, one that could consume her whole. The night was long, filled with dangerous sweetness. But as dawn threatened the horizon, she knew the truth. There was no way to step back into her old life unchanged. What had happened on that rooftop would mark her forever. And deep down, she feared the worst, that her escape from one prison might have led her into another. Morning came like a thief, stealing away the darkness that had hidden her secrets. The rooftop felt different now, no longer a dream, but evidence of choices she could not undo. The candles had burned out, the champagne glasses stood empty, and she sat in silence, wrapped in confusion. He was watching her, always watching. His expression was softer now, almost tender, but beneath that softness, something dangerous lingered. Last night changed everything, he said. You belong to me now. The word struck her like a blow. She hadn't thought about belonging. She had thought about escape, about freedom, about the warmth she'd been denied for so long. But to him, it wasn't freedom he offered. It was possession. She pulled her hand away, trembling. I can't stay here. I have a life I can't just walk away from. His jaw tightened. A life? You mean that man who treats you like dirt? That isn't a life. That's a death sentence. I can give you everything he never could. Don't run from me. Her breath hitched. For a moment, she believed him, wanted to believe him. But deep down, she knew the truth. He didn't see her as a woman with choices. He saw her as a prize. By the time she returned to the apartment, her husband was already there, his anger boiling. The smell of beer filled the air as he stormed toward her. Where the hell have you been? He shouted, his voice echoing through the cramped space. Look at you, dressed up, reeking of perfume. Who were you with? Her hands shook as she tried to speak. It's not what you think. He cut her off, slamming his fist against the table. Don't lie to me. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think you can just walk out and come back whenever you like? You're nothing without me. Nothing. His words pierced her, but for the first time, they didn't bury her completely. Because somewhere in her heart, a voice whispered back, No, I am not nothing. The days that followed blurred into a storm. Her husband's suspicion grew, his cruelty sharper than ever. And the neighbor, he didn't stop. He called, he waited, he lingered outside her door, insisting she was his, that he could save her if she just surrendered. She was trapped between two cages, one of abuse, the other of obsession. Freedom dangled just out of reach, like sunlight through a locked window. One evening, the confrontation came to a breaking point. Her husband discovered the hidden messages, the champagne receipt she hadn't thrown away. His rage was volcanic. He grabbed her, shaking her until she thought her bones would break. You think someone else will love you? No one will. You're mine. Do you hear me? Mine. And then, as if fate itself had written the script, the door burst open. Her neighbor stood there, eyes blazing, his voice dark and steady. No, she's mine. The two men clashed, not just fists, but wills, both desperate to claim her. She stood frozen, tears burning her eyes, as the truth struck her like lightning. Neither of them saw her as a woman, as a soul, as someone deserving of peace. To her husband, she was property. To her neighbor, she was an obsession. To both, she was something to own. The fight ended as quickly as it began, leaving destruction in its wake. Her husband's fury, her neighbor's desperation, her own shattered heart, it all collapsed into silence. And in that silence, she made a choice. She packed nothing. She carried nothing. She simply walked out, leaving behind the prison of her marriage and the dangerous fire of her neighbor's desire. She didn't know where the road would take her, didn't know if she would find safety or love. But for the first time in years, her steps were her own. Later, she would remember his words, her neighbor's last desperate plea as she shut the door between them. No one has ever abandoned me. Don't be the first. And she would remember the way her husband spat after her, promising she would come crawling back. But she never did, because she had learned the hardest truth of all. Love can heal, but it can also wound. And sometimes, the only way to survive is not to choose between cages, but to break free entirely.